So a couple of caveats before I begin speaking, always things the congregation wants to hear. So first, tonight I am not going to be speaking about the proposed peace deal that is on the table. Not because I don't want to speak about it, but I'm waiting, hoping, praying that all sides accept it and embrace it, and that it will lead to a peaceful and prosperous future for both Israelis and Palestinians. Do I have concerns? Absolutely. Is it imperfect? Every deal is. But we pray that soon, speedily and soon, there will be an end of the violence and the suffering, but we shall see what tomorrow brings. And secondly, in preparation for this sermon, weeks ago I told Cantor exactly what I was going to be speaking about, and that was a sermon I wrote and prepared. And then I put the sermon aside. Then I wrote a second sermon, and I put that sermon aside. Then I wrote a third sermon and put that sermon aside. So you guys are getting the fourth one. To give you a little insight into the way I do these things, I keep writing and thinking until I come up with the words that I would want to hear. Now, it might be imperfect. It's still a work in progress. For as they say, no sermon is completed, they're only abandoned. But bear with me this evening as we speak and share the words that touched my soul and hopefully will touch yours as well. Collectively, the Yamim Noraim are often referred to as the days of awe. However, the Hebrew root Yud Resh He Yara has a double meaning. It can mean awe, but it can also mean fear. The implication is that at this season, we are supposed to both be in awe of the enormity of the day, but also a little fearful of the possibility if we are unable to fully engage in the process of teshuvah, of turning towards the people we aspire and ought to be. Theologically, this makes sense. We recite the Unatan HaTokef, whose words include, on Rosh Hashanah it is inscribed, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed. How many shall pass away, and how many shall be born? Who shall live, and who shall die? Who shall reach the end of his days, and who shall not? Who shall perish by water, and who by fire? Who by sword, and who by wild beast? And so on, and so forth. The implication being that the ultimate penalty and salvation are both determined during this 10-day period. No wonder we Jews are predisposed to anxiety. However, despite the harshness of the language, Unatan HaTokef presents us with the possibility of salvation. As we learn from other rabbinic writings, 3 things cancel the decree, and they are tefillah, prayer, tzedakah, often translated as charity, and teshuvah, repentance. In this way, the liturgy is presenting us both, to use modern parlance, the carrot and the stick. It is providing us both fear and hope. It is a really fascinating liturgical exploration at the heart of the Yamim Noraim, which is intended to both upset and challenge us at this time. This is all well and good, Rabbi, but what if we are already entering into the Yamim Noraim in a state of an anxiety and fear, not because of the liturgy, but because of the state of the world today? As we spoke about on Rosh Hashanah, we are living in a time of ever-rising Jew hatred, which is scary enough. But there's also an ever-increasing social acceptance of anti-Semitism. As David Badiel writes in his book, Jews Don't Count, Jews are the only objects of racism who are imagined by the racists as both low and high status. Jews are stereotyped by the racists in all the same ways that the other minorities are, as lying, thieving, dirty, vile, stinking, but also moneyed, privileged, powerful, and secretly in control of the world. Jews are somehow both subhuman and humanity's secret masters. And it's this racist mythology that's in the air when the left pause before putting Jews into their sacred circle, because all the people in the sacred circle are oppressed. And if believe even a little bit that Jews are moneyed, privileged, powerful, and secretly in control of the world, well, you can't put them into the sacred circle of the oppressed. Some might even say, that they belong in the damned circle of the oppressors. Added to this is the rising level of political violence, anti-Zionism, hyper-politicalization, gun violence, sinat chinam, baseless hatred, and the like. And it is no wonder that so many of us are always on edge. In order to distract myself from the travails of the world, I will admit that I have often gone down the rabbit hole a few too many times on Insta Reels. It was during my doom scrolling that one particular reel caught my attention. This reel was from a lovely woman who was explaining that she is a Christian who is often hired to sing in a variety of choirs. She was explaining that this was the first year she was hired to sing in a Jewish choir on Rosh Hashanah. The crux of her video was her utter dismay at the amount of security she witnessed both outside and inside the synagogue. It was unfathomable to her how we Jews have to live this way. I wanted to shout to the screen, "Welcome, welcome to our world." But I am grateful that at least one more person gets it. I'm acutely aware that there are even some in our community who are fearful to join us for the Yamim Noraim out of fear. And I'm so grateful to all of you, each and every one of you who is here with us this evening. I will admit, there are moments where I am fearful as well, where my mind goes into that dark place and envisions all the possible scenarios, including when I turn my back to the congregation to lead the Amidah or Avinu Malkeinu. This is in part why we take security so seriously and review our safety procedures so often, and why we are in regular contact with law enforcement and try to maintain a level of hypervigilance, sometimes to the point of distraction. To be a Jew means sometimes having to live in fear. Sadly, in addition to our everyday fears, there is also the generational trauma of fear. As Simon Radidowitz wrote in his 1948 essay, The Ever-Dying People, quote, "He who studies Jewish history will readily discover that there was hardly a generation in the diaspora that did not consider itself the final link in Israel's chain. Each always saw before it the abyss ready to swallow it up. There was scarcely a generation that, while toiling, falling, and rising again, being uprooted and striking new roots, was not filled with the deepest anxiety, lest it be fated to stand at the grave of the nation, to be buried in it. Each generation grieved not only for itself, but also for the great past that was going to disappear forever, as well as for the future of unborn generations who would never see the light of day. Combine the realities of modern everyday fear with the Jewish existential fears, and it is no wonder that we invented psychoanalysis. And yet we learn from the liturgy and from the Jewish experience, we are forbidden from allowing the fear to consume us. Every year at the start of Elul, traditionally we recite Psalm 27. Adonai is my light and my help. Whom shall I fear? Adonai is the strength of my life. Whom shall I be afraid? Here now, we are beginning to find an answer to help guide us through such times. As Christopher Willard writes, fear is a powerful physiological response, the amygdala being one player in that system. Our brain's primary responses to fear are short-term: fight, flight, freeze, and forget it. Okay, maybe not always forget it. But here's the thing. When the threat detection system in our brain is activated and fear takes over, other areas of the brain aren't as active, making it difficult for us to do our best thinking. Things like being able to see the big picture clearly, discern danger from reality, see nuance and complexity, plan long-term solutions, and problem solve become challenging. The good news is that we can observe our reactions. While we're all wired to think and feel, to fear and fret, we're also wired to attend, and as psychologists would say, these responses are not just feel-good sentiments, but natural to all of us and extremely useful in times of uncertainty and fear. What can we do? We can attend and befriend. In terms of attending and befriending, what better way to approach anxiety and fear than in solidarity with others? To remember that we are not living in such challenging times in isolation, but we are living through them together. I would argue this is the moment for us to double down on what it means to be in relationship and what it means to be part of a sacred community. To borrow again from Psalm 27, but to transform it a little bit based on the Buberian notion that we can find God through our sacred relationships. If our community is my light and my help, whom shall I fear? If our community is the strength of my life, whom shall I be afraid? In addition, our fear can also be our greatest weapon. As Philip Isle wrote about the ever-dying people, Raditowitz spins our collective uneasiness into something life-affirming. A people dying for thousands of years means a living people. He wrote, our incessant dying means uninterrupted living, rising, standing up, beginning anew. We are now at a moment where we have the opportunity to not only face our fears, to not only embrace our fears, but also to refocus them into something constructive and possibly even something beautiful and meaningful. We need to double down on community and on living authentic, meaningful Jewish lives. Why do we gather together every year on the Yamim Noraim, the high holiest of days, where our tradition compels us to be filled with awe? It does this to remind us that we are in fact not alone. We are part of a larger community that is there for one another to help each other to both conquer fear and overcome the sources of these fears. To do this, we do not need to merely focus on the question of who shall live and who shall die, but also on how to bring about greater tefillah, teshuvah, and tzedakah, or to think about it another way. Doing more Jewish is a way of confronting fear, finding faith, engaging with community, having hope for now and for the future are all, in some ways, radical Jewish acts to confront, to counter fear's severe decree. To live a full and proud Jewish life is how we combat our fears. We must live our convictions, and we must live with courage. By radically and authentically embracing our tradition, we will find courage. I remember reading a story from Dana Bash, Dana Schwartz, who hosted a special on CNN a couple of years ago, 1 year prior to October 7th, entitled Rising Hate, Anti-Semitism in America. In the special, Dana tells a story about her son. In the weeks leading up to Hanukkah, her less than 10-year-old son told her that he wanted a Jewish star necklace. It was rather a soft ask, so she quietly let it go. To be honest, she wasn't sure how she felt about the idea of him wearing his Jewish faith so prominently in public. It is not that she was embarrassed or ashamed, just the opposite. She has always been extremely proud of her Judaism. She displays a mezuzah on the outside door of her home, as is our custom, but wearing a Jewish star is something she had never considered for herself, much less for her young son. So she never bought it. Then halfway through the 8 days of Hanukkah, her son somewhat sheepishly asked if she had gotten him the only thing he had asked for, a Jewish star. She admitted that she hadn't and asked what made him want one. He said that a lot of his Christian friends at school wore crosses and that he wanted to wear a symbol of his own faith. He told her he is a proud Jew. To hear this come out of her young son's mouth was jaw-dropping. That he takes such pride in his religion, one preserved and practiced for thousands of years through countless generations of her family, made her feel incredibly emotional. Dana immediately thought of her great-grandparents and aunt, Hungarian Jews, who were not particularly observant, but were murdered by the Nazis during World War II anyway. Dana thought of her grandparents who escaped the Nazis and miraculously made it to the U.S. only 2 months before Pearl Harbor. They became patriotic Americans who never took for granted the ability to practice their Judaism freely. Without knowing enough to make those connections, Dana's son was asking to take up that mantle because it is his heart, it is his blood, and it is in his heart. So she said yes. They got the Jewish star and a chain to go with it. What Dana did not say and what she was ashamed to even admit to herself was that her young son, showing the world that he is Jewish, made her nervous. She knew what in his innocence he did not know. She knew that anti-Semitism is on the rise in America. She knew that government had launched deadly attacks at synagogues in Pittsburgh and Poway, California, because they hated Jews. She knew that anti-Semitic incidences were increasing on college campuses. She knew about conspiracies about Jews were among the oldest on the planet. And what Dana did not know is what she learned in talking to the experts and victims in her interviews, that wearing a Jewish star can actually be a tactic in combating prejudice against Jews. Now, it's been a while since her son got his Star of David necklace, his Magen David. He wears it every day, sometimes under his shirt, sometimes out for everyone to see. He says he has never had any negative issues. When Dana asked why he likes wearing it, he replied simply, "It's my identity, Mom." It turns out that normalizing the practice and pride in Judaism is one of the antidotes to prejudice and fear, and something that her young son understood innately. Whether we choose to wear a Magen David or a kippah, whether we choose to engage more with our community or our heritage or our tradition, whether we find new pathways to embrace our Jewishness, all of it, no matter what we choose, all of it is an antidote to the pervasive fear surrounding and overwhelming us. We may never live to see the day of Isaiah's dream of all living under their own vine and fig, where none are afraid. But as we await the arrival of the messianic vision of this day, let us strive to live in the way Mark Twain was famously described when it comes to fear. Courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. With that in mind, as we set out on this new year, may we all be inspired to live a little more courageously and not give into the fear too many of us are feeling. May we find ways to double down on our Judaism, our community, and our relationships. We may not know who shall live or who shall die, but we can all know who shall live with conviction and who can live with courage. And when we falter, and we will falter, we know where we can turn to find strength and fortitude, even in the face of fear. For it is with each other and through each other that we may find the possibilities and the opportunities for our own salvation. On this Kol Nidre, as we just heard the haunting words, may we be reminded to double down on our vow that we give every year to embrace and live authentic and meaningful Jewish lives and be a part of a sacred community that embraces us, welcomes us, sustains and supports us. For these days may be filled with fear and dread, but they are also days filled with hope and opportunity and blessing as well. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.